speaking of the sleepers, we have our sleepers for this year. You want to get us going with your sleepers?
Sure. So my sleeper,
And I hate your sleeper.
I only have one actually because you
I
took
didn't even bother to like put him
up
on any
from
of my
mine.
list because I figured he's just cooked and everyone knows it. But go ahead.
No, Trevor Story is not cooked and nobody knows it. So yeah, my sleeper is Trevor Story at 175. Just feels like good value. I think, it's been kind of a rough few years for him ever since he left Coors and Colorado. Curious as to why you hate it, but I think he's finally got some time. He's taken a few years essentially off because of injury, and was kind of underperforming. But I think I'm ready to buy in at that price because I think it's likely that he has kind of bottomed out. Maybe there's a little bit of an age decline. Maybe he's not what he once was, but at 175, I think that's where it's like, okay, that feels pretty low because this was a guy who was, consistently power speed for many, many years. I just don't know how you quit on that we see so many guys with one, hot flashes, like Bo Bichette maybe is an example, right? Where he had a hot flash of speed and everybody jumped all on board and then fell off very quickly. I don't see how you give up totally on a guy like Trevor Story who did it for so many years. And now that he finally has another chance to hopefully play injury free, injuries are obviously going to be a part of it, but I don't think the skills fall off when you did it for as long as you did. So
I don't
think
want to
Trevor
use.
Story.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't want to
No,
use you
that's it.
against you. I said go ahead and then start talking again, but I don't want to use you against you. But when we talked about Arenado, you're like, well, he had the boost in Colorado for all those years, and now he's out of Colorado and he doesn't look as good and he's getting older. And Arenado hasn't dealt with the injuries that Story's dealt with. Story's dealt with injuries. Story also, when you talk about guys who signed their big contract and all of a sudden seem like disinterested, I mean, the Anthony Rendon story is crazy. You want to talk about that for a second? We definitely probably should. Did we talk about it on last episode? I don't think we hit on it.
I may have touched on it, but I don't know. Yeah,
I may have touched on it for a second, but just if you don't know, Anthony Rendon said basically baseball's not his top priority, which is okay, I guess. I'm sure a lot of guys, it's not their top priority. It's a job for them. But when you sign a huge contract and then you don't play for most of that contract and you heavily disappoint after being one of the top players in the league for a bunch of years in a row before signing that contract, maybe that's something you keep to yourself and you don't say out loud. So I think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah. That's good.
And then so I feel similar. Maybe Story's one of those guys who's just not saying it. Like, he signed this big deal. He's not on a very good team. He's not in Coors Field anymore. He hasn't been good. He hasn't been healthy. And it just feels like almost like the Tulowitzki drop off, which was just like when he went to Toronto, he just wasn't the same guy. And he wasn't that old. Like, Story's 31. He's not that old. And you'd think he's like 35 the way his body has been the last few years and the way he just hasn't been. The drop off just seems shocking. And I get what you're saying. If he can be 80% of what Trevor Story was in Colorado, then at that ADP, ridiculously insane value. So again, you're talking about that's what a sleeper is, low risk. So I get why you think he's a sleeper. I just don't see it with him. So maybe I don't hate the pick so much, but I'm not as high on him. And that's part of it. That's what drafting a sleeper is a guy that maybe you think has a chance to give you more than the draft value you're drafting for him. So maybe I do like the pick better than
you talk yourself into it a little bit.
Yeah, I just talked myself into it completely. So thank you for that. My sleeper number one is Jeremy Pena. You saw his power. We talked about this. His power completely fell off, right? Dropped out of nowhere. And then he's down to like 220 right now. I saw on one of the on some of the lists. And I think a guy who came up and was so good so early on, obviously the year they won the World Series, to me, that doesn't just go away. Maybe he had a little bit of that sophomore slump that we've talked about in a bunch of episodes already. And so maybe he could get back to what he was in that rookie year, in that playoff run. I think he can. I think if he could get the power up a little bit, because it's weird that it took such a step back. I don't know what it was. Maybe you can see the peripherals, or maybe you're looking at it and you see that there's something there that lends the power numbers coming down so much. But I think at 220, he's going to be the shortstop every day in a great lineup. I kind of like it there.
Yeah. So the reason where his power fell off is he already came in 2022. He finished with a 46% ground ball rate, which is already pretty high. But then last year went up to 54.3%. That's just you're hitting the ball into the ground way too much. And that's why he only had 10 home runs in 150 games. So already being high at 46%, in 2022, there's not much room there. So it does kind of scare me. I think it's a good value though. That being said, I don't think we should expect to see where he was before. I don't think he's going to get back to 22 again. Maybe another guy that we kind of saw his power peak, unless he can fix the launch angle. Just
Yeah,
easier said
he's
than
so
done.
young. To me, it's like you're so young, you're in a great lineup. There's no pressure on you to really be that guy. And maybe that helps him develop into that guy. So like you said, it's similar to Trevor Story in the sense that I'm not saying he's going to have a great season, but for the draft pick that you're getting him at, maybe you can get a lot more than what you're taking there.
Yeah.
So I think it's similar there. The other one I have is a different story, a guy who I think could end up being, early May, mid-May call up. And that's probably someone you're going to hit on your prospect list, but that's Jackson Holliday. I mean, I saw this kid when the Orioles drafted him. I was working down there in Baltimore. He's ridiculous. He's 5-tool player. He's the type of guy that if maybe you draft him and stash him, maybe you're just early on him and you start hearing the rumblings that they might call him up. And then all of a sudden, second half of the season, he's carrying your team down the stretch of the year with a monster, kind of like Adley did. The Orioles like this. They did it with Adley a couple years ago. They did it with Gunnar the next year where they call these guys up and all of a sudden these guys make immediate impacts. I think another one who could do that is Jackson Holliday. He might be more of a prospect to watch, but in a dynasty league for sure, he's a good sleeper. Obviously in a dynasty league, he wouldn't be a sleeper. He's probably already drafted if you have a dynasty league. But like I said, if it's a league that's a little bit deeper and you can afford to stash him for the first couple months of the season, I think he could be real value.
Yeah, Jackson Holliday is in the dynasty world. He's already a top 25 asset. Like you could trade Jackson Holliday for Juan Soto and a small piece. That's how good. I mean, that's the kind of talent we're talking about.
Do you think he ends up getting called up this year? I know he's flown through the minors, whatever, a bunch of games at AA and then AAA, and they're planning on playing him at second base a bunch this year to get him ready for the majors. I mean, that's what it is, right? They have Gunnar at short or at third base, however they're going to split that up. He could be a guy who's seeing Camden Yards this year.
Oh yeah. I mean, if he doesn't, it's got to be because of injury or something. I'm in the camp of, I mean, especially you want these guys to perform for as long as they, you want him to feel comfortable. If I'm the Orioles, why not have him up day one? Like you're going to bring him up at some point. Why not try to have him up and ready?
Well, he's 19 or 20. Like he's still so young. He looks like a child, right?
Does that matter? Like he could play. Like
I guess with Juan Soto, it didn't matter.
Hits. So
by the way, I think minor league baseball, and this is going to sound like such a bad take. It's going to minor league baseball is a sham. Like, come on, like, come on, like you have Spencer Jones hitting a 470-foot bomb, and he's huge, and he's 22 years old, and he's athletic, and it's like, what else does he need to do on the minor league level that he can't just figure out if he's this good? Like, just, I'm not saying for everyone, but I think for some of these prospects, like it gets ridiculous where it like turns out I'm hating on baseball so much on this show. I hate it. Like I'm not happy about this. This is wild. This was unexpected. I love baseball. I promise you. Like I love baseball. I think like I love baseball, and that's why I have these strong opinions about it. But with a guy like Spencer Jones, it's just like, what else is he doing? Where I get it that there are some prospects they need to develop, but like with a guy like him, it just feels like contract manipulation and arbitration manipulation. And it felt the same way with Dominguez, right? Last year, he kills it in spring training. Like, well, we're not calling him up. And then all of a sudden they call him up and immediately he was incredible and impactful for the Yankees. So it was like, you're going to tell me that if Dominguez wasn't up in June, the Yankees wouldn't have had a much better season? You can't convince me that that's not true.
Were they running out Aaron Hicks in center field?
They cut him eventually, but that's my point. What do you mean? They had I can't even remember some of the names of the guys. I went to the Subway Series, and who did they have? I mean, I could picture them. Billy McKinney was playing left field for them. Like, right. Are you really? Billy McKinney was the reason why you couldn't bring up Jason Dominguez, who the second they called him up was incredible. It just makes no sense to me.